Hey guys, tonight we set off on a journey, an impossible one, really. You stand there in Independence, Missouri, staring at your freshly loaded wagon, and it's stacked high with barrels of bacon, sacks of flour, a few rifles, and maybe, if you're feeling fancy, a big jar of pickle. The sun's already hot, baking the dirt under your boots into a crusty, crackling mess. Your oxen snort and shift uneasily, clearly unhappy with the prospect of dragging your dreams westward. You hear the chatter of other hopefuls nearby, some with laughter, some with voices already tight with worry. The air smells of dust, sweat, and the faint whiff of manure. You squint westward, imagining the miles ahead. You probably won't survive this, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Post your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first step is easy, or so you think. You snap the reins, and your oxen lurch forward with a resigned grunt. Dust puffs up behind your wagon, mixing with the smell of hot leather and wood. You're full of optimism, a little bit of nervous energy, and a whole lot of assumption, like assuming that bacon alone will get you through months on the trail, or that the Mississippi spring floods won't delay you, or that your cousin's homemade wagon repairs will hold up past the first dozen bumps. By midday, the trail narrows, ruts cut deep into the earth from wagons ahead of you, and you feel each jolt as your wheels dip and strain. The oxen breathe heavily, tongues lolling as the sun bakes down on their backs. Your companions complain, already, about the heat, the dust in their throats, and how they wish they'd left that extra trunk of china at home. Historians still argue whether most settlers overpacked from romanticism or ignorance, but one thing's for sure, you've got too much stuff. That afternoon, you hear the sharp crack of a wagon axle behind you. Someone's overloaded cart has snapped, scattering flour, bacon, and family heirlooms into the date. It's a mess and a lesson. The settler who thought bringing a full-length mirror was a good idea now has bigger problem. Meanwhile, you feel a quiet sense of dread. Your own wagon's creaking ominously, and you haven't even reached the first real obstacle yet. A few miles later, the trail dips into a wide, muddy stretch. It's deceptively smooth on the surface, but as your wheels roll forward, they sink halfway to the hubs. Your oxen grunt and strain, trying to pull free, but the mud holds like quicksand. You clamber down into the muck, squelching ankle deep to push. Your boots fill with cold, slimy water. Mud spatters up your trousers and into your wagon bed, coating the flour sacks and dampening the canvas. The oxen heave again, and with a final, sucking noise, the wagon lurches free. You're exhausted already, and the sun's still a molten disk above you. That evening, you make camp a few miles past the mud. The site looks serene at first, a grassy clearing by a small stream. You unload supplies, gather firewood, and start cooking a simple meal. The aroma of sizzling bacon mingles with smoke, and for a moment, you think maybe this adventure isn't so bad. But then, as the sky turns a deep purple and the first stars appear, the mosquitoes descend like a biblical plague. They whine in your ears, bite your hands and face, and drive the oxen nearly mad. You slap and swat, but the bites keep coming. By the time you huddle in your blankets, you're itchy, sweaty, and bone-tired. You listen to the chorus of snores, low murmurs, and the faint rustle of night creatures. Somewhere, a coyote howls, its call echoing through the darkness. You're startled, but soon your eyelids droop, heavy with exhaustion. You sleep fitfully, dreaming of home, warm beds, and the comforting creak of wooden floorboards under your feet. The next morning, you wake to damp blankets, stiff limbs, and a trail that seems longer than you remember. Breakfast is hurried, hardtack and more bacon, washed down with bitter coffee. You repack the wagon, double-check the harnesses, and push forward. But there's a new problem. Your oxen are balky, perhaps from the muddy struggle the day before, or from the buzzing clouds of flies that have been tormenting them all morning. You coax them forward, but they move grudgingly, like sullen children. Mid-morning brings your first river crossing. It's not the mighty Missouri yet, but a swollen creek that's deceptively swift. The water laps at the wheels, and the current tugs insistently at your ankles as you wade in to guide the oxen. Your wagon rocks dangerously, and for a breathless moment, you think it's going to tip. But with a groan and a final shove, it's across. Your supplies, however, are damp. Some of your flour is ruined. The The gunpowder's wet, and a crate of pickles is lost at current. You watch the jar swirl away downstream, wondering if you'll ever taste a dill spey again. At midday, you pause for a rest in the sparse shade of a cottonwood tree. The sun beats down mercilessly, and you notice how parched your throat feels. You ration the water carefully, reminding yourself there's a long way to go before the next river. The oxen doze uneasily, swishing their tails at persistent flies. As the day stretches into late afternoon, your progress slows. Ruts deepen, and the terrain grows rockier. You hear a fellow traveler complain loudly that his boots are already worn through. Someone else grumbles about the bacon grease leaking into their grain sacks. You're hot, dirty, and starting to question your life choices. By dusk, you reach a clearing where the grass is trampled and littered with bone. It's an old campsite, probably abandoned in a hurry. You recognize the telltale signs: scattered ashes, discarded scraps of clothing, and the faint odor of rot. It's unsettling, but your party decides to camp here anyway. You light fires, post watches, and huddle close. As darkness falls and the first chill of night creeps in, you can't shake the feeling that you're being watched. Shadows shift among the trees, and the wind stays the grass like furtive footsteps. You remind yourself that it's probably just the wind, or maybe those coyotes again. But as you finally drift into uneasy sleep, you wonder how far you'll make it before something, or someone, decides you're not worth the trouble. You wake up before dawn, and the air is cool, almost soothing against your sunburned skin. But as you sit up and stretch, your back creaks like a wagon wheel. Around you, the camp stays sluggishly, with muttered curses and the hiss of fires rekindling to warm up bitter coffee and last night's bacon scraps. The clearing looks a little less eerie by morning light, but that doesn't erase a memory of shadows slinking past your tent. With heavy boots and heavier hearts, you set out again. The trail today is rougher than ever, rutted and uneven, the earth gouged deep by the iron wheels of those ahead. You try to keep the oxen in the track ruts, but the mud, hardened in patches, throws them off balance. One beast stumbles, and your wagon shudders violently. You hold your breath, but the animal recovers, snorting its displeasure. Soon, the trail dips toward a river crossing, a real one this time. The river ahead is wide and brown, with eddies swirling along its banks. Other wagons are already there, waiting their turn to ford. Some travelers have decided to cork their wagons and float them across, while others debate building rafts. You watch as one group tries a floating method, only for the current to catch their wagon, spin it sideways, and dump their goods into the churning water. You hear shouts and curses, but nothing can be done. The river claims what it will. You steel yourself for your turn. You've lashed barrels and crates securely, but that's no guarantee. The oxen hesitate, sensing the deeper water and stronger current. You wade in, your boots filling with cold water, and urge them forward. The wagon creaks ominously as it enters the river. For a moment, everything feels weightless. Then the current tugs hard, pulling the wheel sideways. Your heart pounds as you push at the yoke, trying to correct the angle. With a slushing heave, the wagon rights itself and lurches onto the far bank. You're soaked, your supplies damp, but you're across. You breathe out shakily, and the oxen, for their part, seem to sigh too. As you move away from the river, you notice the landscape subtly shifting. The grass thinned, replaced by low scrub and patches of exposed rock. The sun climbs higher, its heat intensifying. You feel it burning the back of your neck, drying the mud into a crusty, cracking layer on your boot. Flies buzz persistently around your face, drawn by the sweat and the stink of wet canvas and damp oxen. By midday, the trail rises into a gentle incline, but the ruts deepen, turning the track into a rocky mess. The wheels jolt and lurch, sending vibrations up your spine. One of the front wheels hits a hidden stone with a sickening crack. You scramble to inspect the damage, a splintered spoke. You'll need to stop and repair it, but that means unloading part of the wagon, and you can almost hear your companion's groans already. Historians still argue whether the trail's dangers were overstated in pioneer diaries, but right now, it's hard to imagine they were exaggerated at all. You set to work with what tools you have, whittling down a replacement spoke from a rough timber. The process is slow and awkward, your hands blistering as you struggle to fit it. Meanwhile, the sun shows no mercy, and your shirt clings damply to your back. The oxen shift uneasily, tugging at their harnesses. You catch a few grumbled suggestions about leaving the wagon behind and traveling light, but abandoning supplies would be as good as signing your death warrant. Repairs done, More or less, you move on. The terrain grows rougher as the day wears on. The path twists through gullies and shallow ravines, where rainwater has carved treacherous furrows. At one point, the wagon tips dangerously to one side, threatening to spill everything. You scramble to redistribute weight, shifting barrels and crates by hand while the oxen fidget. Finally, with a grunt of exertion and a few colorful words muttered under your breath, you stabilize the load. Toward evening, you reach a spot where the trail crosses a low ridge. From the top, you can see the landscape unfurl for miles, a patchwork of grasslands, rocky outcrops, and the winding line of a distant river. It's beautiful in a stark, unforgiving way, but your admiration is short-lived. The descent on the other side is steep and scattered with loose stone. You brace yourself as a wagon groans and jerks down the incline. The oxen slip and slide, hooves skidding on the unstable surface. About halfway down, one wheel catches a jagged stone and lurches violently. The entire wagon shudders, and for a heart-stopping moment, you think it's going to capsize. But somehow, by sheer luck, or perhaps sheer stubbornness, it rights itself. You reach the bottom breathless, shaken, and clutching the reins so tightly your knuckles ache. That night's camp is a somber one. Everyone's exhausted, tempers frayed, and food supplies are already looking thin. You boil a pot of beans and bacon, but there's not enough to go around. Some of the party grumble about fairness, others about bad luck. One older traveler mutters darkly about spirits in the river pulling at wagon, while a younger voice scoffs and calls it nonsense. You sit back, listening to the crackle of the fire and the low hum of voices. The prairie stretches out dark and endless around you, dotted with fireflies and the occasional flicker of distant lightning. As you settle into a restless sleep, you hear the faint, persistent sound of insects buzzing. You think about that broken wheel, about the swirling river, and about the way your wagon shuddered like it had its own mind. You remind yourself that tomorrow is just another day, and you're still here, still moving forward. Dawn breaks with a chill that seeps into your bone. The morning mist clings low over the prairie, coating your blankets and wagon canvas in a fine sheen of dew. You rise stiffly, rubbing sleep from your eyes and swatting at the gnats already swirling in lazy pattern. Your muscles ache, but you don't have the luxury of stretching long. The trail waits, and it won't get any shorter. Breakfast is meager. Hardtack softened in coffee, a few strips of overcooked bacon that crumble between your fingers. The oxen snort and shift restlessly, perhaps sensing what's to come. As you break camp and hitch them up, one of your companions mutters about how the food's running low. Another remarks grimly that if someone gets sick, there won't be much in the way of medicine. Your group sets off, but before long, there's a commotion up ahead. You quicken your pace, heart sinking as you approach. One of the children in the neighboring wagon has taken ill overnight, feverish, pale, and clutching at his stomach. His mother's face is pinched with worry as she tries to spoon him water from a tin cup. There's talk of dysentery, but soon the whispers turn darker. Cholera. You feel the collective tension in the air, a prickling dread that settles over the party like a heavy fog. Historians still argue whether cholera outbreaks on the trail were inevitable or could have been avoided with better hygiene. Right now, though, that debate feels as far away as the moon. What you see are thin lips pressed together in silent prayers and trembling hands checking for symptoms. A few travelers mutter about keeping their distance, and one older man insists that the family should be left behind to fend for themselves. Your stomach churns, partly from fear, partly from the bitter tang of stale coffee and hardtack sitting heavy in your gut. By midday, the sick child's condition worsens. His mother tries to shield him from the sun with a canvas sheet, but the air grows thick and stifled. He cries out softly, a weak sound that tugs at your heart. You halt for an early camp near Sluggish Creek. The water looks clear enough, but you hesitate before drinking. Remembering the whispers of cholera, you boil it thoroughly, though the effort feels almost futile. The sun pounds down on your shoulders as you watch the others care for the sick child. Someone pulled a makeshift stretcher from wagon board, and they debate whether to carry him or let him rest. By evening, the child's breathing slows. His mother's sobs are low and broken, the sound carrying through the still air. There's nothing anyone can do. Some of your companions turn away, busying themselves with wagon repairs or repacking supplies. You feel a hollow ache in your chest as you realize the trail isn't just about survival. It's about watching helplessly while others don't. Dinner that night is somber. You chew mechanically on a piece of jerky, its tough fibers scraping your teeth. The stars emerge one by one, cold and distant, as the fire crackles low. Someone tells a half-hearted joke about a snake oil salesman they met back in Independence, but it falls flat. There's a weight in the air, a collective silence punctuated only by the occasional cough or the restless shifting of sleeping companions. In the darkness, you hear coyotes calling, their eerie yips rising and falling across the prairie. You pull your blanket tighter, though the air is still warm. Sleep comes in uneasy fits, broken by vivid dreams of home, of cool sheets, warm bread, and familiar faces. You wake often, listening to the night sounds and wondering if you'll make it to the next sunrise. Morning brings grim news. The child has passed. The mother sits quietly by the still form, her face streaked with dust and tears. A few of your companions gather stones to mark the shallow grave they hastily dig. It's a somber, silent task. The only sounds the scrape of stones and the whisper of the wind through the grass. You move on, because you have to. The trail stretches ahead, indifferent to your loss. As you trudge forward, the sun rises higher, beating down relentlessly. Flies swarm your face, and the air fills with a scent of sweat, dust, and the faint metallic tang of fear. You notice more travelers coughing, rubbing their bellies, glancing anxiously at each other. The water barrels are running low, and no one's quite sure if the creek they passed was safe. Some are rationing their meager supplies, while others hoard them jealously. One woman insists on boiling everything, while another mutters about old remedies involving whiskey and mustard plaster. Quirky or not, desperation brings out all sorts of belief. By late afternoon, the trail narrows between two low ridges. You stumble slightly, catching yourself in a wagon spoke as the path winds between clusters of scrubby brush and scattered boulders. The oxen strain against the harness, their sides heaving with effort. You glance up to see a vulture circling high overhead, its dark wings stark against the pale sky. You shiver despite the heat. Somewhere ahead, you hear someone call out. A wagon has thrown a wheel. The party halts as the unlucky travelers scramble to repair it. You lend a hand, though your fingers feel clumsy and raw. Splinters dig into your palms as you wrestle with the wooden spokes, but you manage to help patch it together well enough to move. Evening falls, and you make camp in a hollow surrounded by low hills. It feels slightly safer, sheltered from the wind, but the memories of the day hang heavy. You listen to the crackling fire, the murmured prayers, and the quiet weeping that drifts through the camp. You feel the weight of every mile, every loss, every uncertain step ahead. You're starting to understand. The Oregon Trail isn't just a journey of miles. It's a test of endurance, of spirit, and of how much you're willing to risk for the chance of something better. And right now, you're not sure you're up for it. You wake to the rustle of canvas and the faint sound of morning voices. The air feels a touch cooler today, a slight breeze stirring the grass, but it does nothing to lift the weight pressing down on your chest. The smell of damp earth and sweat fills your nostrils, along with a faint tang of wood smoke from the rekindled campfire. Breakfast is a quiet affair. You nibble at a piece of hardtack, your teeth scraping against its stubborn edges, and sip weak coffee that tastes mostly of boiled water and regret. There's little chatter as the camp breaks down. The group is subdued, shadows under their eyes, voices low. You set out again, trudging forward with a wagon creaking behind you. The oxen plod wearily, their pace slow but steady. The trail today winds through rolling grasslands dotted with wildflowers and low shrubs. It's almost pretty, if you could stop and admire it. But you're too busy scanning the ground ahead, keeping an eye out for hazard. And then it happens. You feel the sharp pain before you see the source. A rattlesnake, coiled and hidden beneath a bush, strikes as you brush past. Its fangs catch the edge of your boot, and though the leather absorbs most of the bite, you feel the shock and the burn. You yelp, staggering back, your heart pounding in your ears. Your companions rush over, voices rising in alarm. Someone kills a snake with a sharp blow from a wagon spoke, but the damage is done. Historians still argue whether snake bites on the trail were as deadly as feared or if the real danger lay in the infections that followed. Either way, you're suddenly the center of worried attention. Someone suggests cutting the wound and sucking out the venom, an old remedy as risky as it is ineffective. Another insists you keep moving, to walk it off, as if sheer determination could neutralize snake venom. You decide to rest, at least for a while. You sit in the shade of the wagon, feeling the sting throb and your ankle begin to swell. Your companions bandage it tightly, using a strip torn from a shirt. Someone offers a sip of whiskey for the pain, though you suspect it's mostly for courage. You accept it gratefully, the burn of alcohol distracting you from the dull ache. As you rest, you notice the ground alive with small creatures. Prairie dogs scurry from their burrows, pausing to chatter and flick their tails. You can't help but smile at their antics. A brief, silly distraction from the grimness of the trail. But even they carry risks, digging holes in a trail that can catch a wheel or an ox's hoof. One traveler tells you a story of a wagon that toppled into a hidden warren, the supplies scattered, the animals injured. It's a reminder that out here, even the smallest creatures can tip fate scales. By midday, your ankles throbbing is ease enough for you to hobble forward. You brace against the wagon side, limping but determined. The trail rises slightly, the ground turning rockier. The sun beats down, relentless as always, and the oxen's sides glisten with sweat. Flies buzz around your head, and you swat them away, feeling the stickiness of dust and grime on your skin. The afternoon brings a fresh challenge, a stretch of trail littered with sharp stones and narrow gaps. The wagon wheels creak and groan as they jolt over the uneven surface. One of the oxen balk, its hooves skidding against the rock. You scramble to calm it, murmuring nonsense as you guide it forward. Your hands tremble with fatigue and the lingering effects of the snake bite. At one point, a wheel catches on a jagged rock, tipping the wagon dangerously. You and your companions leap to steady it, grunting with effort. The wagon rights itself, but not without a cost. A barrel of supplies shifts, and when you open it later, you discover that several sacks of flour are ruined, torn open, the contents spilled and clumped with dust. You try to salvage what you can, shaking out the least contaminated portions and repacking them. But your food stores are dwindling fast. That evening, camp is made in a shallow valley where the grass is sparse and the air still. You huddle close to the fire, the night sound pressing in, a chorus of insects, the distant howl of coyotes, and the occasional snap of a branch in the dark. You wonder if it's just a wind or if something or someone is out there watching. Someone tells a tale of an old prospector who vanished in these parts. His wagon found abandoned, the oxen dead of thirst. His gold, if he had any, was never found. Some say he was taken by outlaws, others by spirits of the land. It's a spooky story, one that makes the shadows seem deeper and the night longer. You try to laugh it off, but the unease lingers. As you settle into your blankets, you glance at your swollen ankle. It's stiff, the bandage dark with dust and sweat. You hope the swelling goes down by morning. You've got enough problems without adding a lame foot to the mix. You close your eyes, listening to the crackling fire and the murmur of voices drifting into sleep. But just as you start to drift off, you hear a sharp rustle nearby. You freeze, straining to listen. It's followed by a low, almost growling sound. You sit up, heart hammering. The oxen stir nervously, shifting their weight and snorting. You grab a stick from the fire, holding the glowing end toward the darkness. The sounds retreat, fading into the night. You lie back down, but sleep doesn't come easily. The prairie is vast and indifferent, and you're beginning to realize just how small and fragile you are out here. The snake bite was a warning, a reminder that every step is a risk, every shadow a potential threat. And you still have miles to go. Dawn isn't gentle today. It slams into camp like a door flung open, the sky already searing blue and the sun rising behind you like a scolding oversea. You wake with a groan, stiff from a night spent on uneven ground, your snake-bitten ankle throbbing in protest. Around you, others stir with similar complaints, rubbing sore shoulders and backs, muttering about the lack of sleep and the buzzing insect that feasted overnight. Breakfast is a meager fare. Hardtack softened in tepid water, a few scraps of bacon left from yesterday's ration. One of your companions gnaws on a strip like a dog with a bone, and you can't help but feel a pang of envy for their determination. But then you glance at the wagon and realize the food supplies are dwindling at an alarming rate. Your heart sinks. You're only partway through the journey, and already you're counting every crumb. As the oxen are harnessed, one animal refuses to move. It digs in its heels, sides heaving, head low. You coax, plead, and finally, with a sharp snap of the reins, it lurches forward. But the tension in the air is palpable. If one of the beasts gives out entirely, you will be stranded. Everyone knows it. Historians still argue whether the death of animals or humans was a more pressing threat on the trail. But at this moment, you're convinced the oxen are the real lifeline. By midday, the sun is a hammer pounding your head. Sweat trickles down your back, soaking your shirt and mixing with the dust caking your skin. Your lips crack from dryness, your tongue feeling like sandpaper. The water barrel rattles in the wagon, nearly empty. There's talk of rationing, just a few sips at a time. But someone points out that without enough hydration, the oxen will fail. The decision is made to prioritize the animal. You sip once, then screw the lid back on, throat still parched. It's not just a thirst wearing you down. The trail itself seems to mock you, rising in cruel little inclines, dropping into gullies choked with rocks and brush. One of your wagon wheels cracks with a sharp report, the sound slicing through the sweltering silence like a gunshot. You stop, unload supplies, and wrestle with a spare wheel. Your hands are raw, your back screaming, but there's no choice. You curse under your breath, at the wheel, at the trail, at yourself for ever thinking this was a grand adventure. That evening, as the sun sinks low, you finally stop near a trickling stream. The water is murky and smells faintly of sulfur, but it's the only option. You boil it, watching the bubbles rise and pop, the steam curling into the cooling air. It tastes foul, but it's wet. You drink cautiously, feeling it slosh in your empty stomach, a small reprieve from the relentless thirst. Dinner is worse than breakfast. Someone proposes stretching the flour with sawdust, half joking, half serious. Another voice suggests boiling leather from an old harness, recalling stories of pioneers desperate enough to chew belts and bootlace it. You laugh, but it's hollow, echoing into the darkening prairie. The mood in camp sours. Arguments flare over trivial matters. Who left the fire unattended? Whose turn it is to fetch water, whether a scrap of jerky belongs to one family or another. Voices rise, sharp with frustration and fear. You try to stay out of it, focusing on cleaning your rifle or adjusting harness straps. But the tension coils tighter, like a rope ready to snap. By moonlight, you walk a short distance from camp to clear your head. The prairie stretches out, silvered by the moon, a silent sea of grass and shadow. You catch a glint of animal eyes in the distance, coyotes, perhaps, or something larger. Your stomach clenches, but you stand your ground. A breeze stays, carrying with it the scent of dust, dry grass, and distant smoke. When you return to camp, you find a makeshift gathering around the fire. Someone's broken out a fiddle, the notes trembling into the night like fragile glass. Others hum along or tap their feet in slow, weary rhythm. It's a small comfort, a thread of normalcy in a world unraveling at the seam. As you lay down for the night, you reflect on the day, the cracked wheel, the parched throats, the fraying temper. You think of home, of warm bread and cool water, of laughter and light. But those memories feel distant, blurred by the dust and sun and the endless horizon ahead. You close your eyes, listening to the fading strains of the fiddle, and let sleep take you. Tomorrow, the trail will test you again. The next morning feels heavier than before, like the trail itself has thickened overnight, dragging at your boots and weighing down your limbs. The sun's barely peeking over the horizon, but it already promises a relentless heat. The oxen are slow to rise, their sides heaving as they pull themselves upright, their eyes dull with exhaustion. You can't blame them. Breakfast is nothing more than a shared pot of thin, watery gruel. You spoon it into your mouth mechanically, chewing even though there's nothing to chew. Your companions' voices are low, tired, a few hollow jokes falling flat. One man mutters that he dreams of a real meal, roast chicken, fresh bread, maybe a slice of pie. The others laugh bitterly. You don't even bother to imagine. The day's trail looms ahead like a challenge you can't refuse. It rises into foothills that catch the morning light, turning gold and ochre, with shadows carving sharp lines through the ravine. You pull the wagon forward, one careful step at a time. The path narrows, ruts digging deep into the ground, the edges crumbling into loose gravel. The oxen struggle, their hooves slipping on the unstable surface. Around midday, you reach a particularly steep incline, a narrow pass hemmed in by boulders and sheer walls of rock. The air feels thin here, dry and sharp with the scent of dust and baked stone. You pause, wiping sweat from your brow, staring up at the challenge ahead. One of your companions voices what you're all thinking. How are we supposed to get through this? Historians still argue whether the mountain passes were chosen poorly or simply the only options available. But either way, the decision's been made. You can't turn back. You tighten the harnesses, lash down your supplies, and start forward. The incline is brutal. The oxen strain, muscles rippling under their dusty hide. You walk beside them, pushing at the wagon's side to keep it steady. Every few steps, the wheels slip against the stones, sending shudders through the frame. The sun beats down, baking the rocks until they radiate heat, burning your hands when you steady yourself. Your breath comes in shallow gasps, your heart pounding as if trying to escape your chest. Halfway up, a wheel catches against a jagged outcrop. You hear the sharp crack of wood under strain, and for a moment, the wagon teeters dangerously. You shout for help, and your companions rush to brace it. Together, you heave and push, your muscles screaming in protest. The wheel grinds over the rock, and the wagon lurches forward a few more feet. But the cost is clear. Another spoke is cracked, and the axle groans ominously. You make camp near the top of the pass, too exhausted to go further. The air is thin and cold, biting into your sweat-damp clothes. The view is stunning. Mountains rolling away into the distance, their peaks touched with the first blush of sunset. But you barely note it. You're too busy rubbing your aching shoulders, checking the wagon's damage, and trying to ignore the gnawing hunger twisting your stomach. Dinner is a few mouthfuls of boiled beans and stale biscuit. Someone tries to start a fire, but the thin air and scattered brush make it difficult. The smoke drifts in thin wisps, and you huddle closer, seeking warmth more than comfort. That night, the wind howls through the pass, a mournful sound that sets your teeth on edge. You wake repeatedly, heart racing, convinced that something's moving just beyond the circle of dim firelight. The shadows dance wildly, and every crack of a branch or scuffle of an animal sends a jolt of fear through your chest. You pull your blanket tighter, but sleep remains elusive. Morning comes too soon, and the descent is no easier. The trail drops sharply, littered with scree and loose stone. You find yourself walking backward, bracing your weight against the wagon to slow its progress. Your legs tremble with effort, and your hands ache from gripping the wood. The oxen, sensing the slope, move hesitantly, their steps cautious and strained. At one point, the wagon skids sideways, the wheels throwing up a spray of gravel. You shout, trying to correct its path, but the weight is too much. It slams into a boulder, jarring the contents and sending a crate of supplies tumbling out. You scramble to retrieve what you can, but some of it is lost. Flour scattered across the rocks, a jar of pickles shattered, the brine soaking into the dust. You finally reach level ground by midday, but you're exhausted, filthy, and bruised. The air is warmer here, thicker, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. You find a small stream and drink deeply, ignoring the grit between your teeth. It's a brief respite, but you know it won't last. That evening, you camp in a small hollow surrounded by trees. The fire crackles brighter than before, fed by fallen branches and pine needles. Someone produces a harmonica, and the plaintive notes weave through the darkness. For a moment, it almost feels peaceful, but the memory of the mountain pass clings to you like a shadow. You fall asleep thinking of the cracked wheel, the bruises on your arms, and the weight of the trail still ahead. You wonder, not for the first time, if you'll ever see the end of it. You wake to a sky that's still dark, though dawn lurks just below the horizon, hinting at muted pinks and dusky blues. The air feels heavier today, thick with moisture, and there's a faint, unsettling rustle in the underbrush nearby. Your companions stir quietly, their movements tense, their whispers lower than usual. The fire from last night has burned to ash, leaving the scent of charred wood hanging in the stillness. You move cautiously, stretching stiff limbs and checking the wagon's harnesses. The oxen seem uneasy, shifting their weight and flicking their ears. One of them snorts and stamps, eyes wide and ears swiveling toward the line of trees edging the clearing. You follow its gaze but see nothing, just shifting shadows and the flicker of early light on leaves. Still, the feeling of being watched lingers. As you pack up, someone mutters about strange noises during the night, a snapping twig, a low growl, maybe coyotes, maybe something else. One traveler jokes nervously about skinwalkers, while another insists it was just a wind. Historians still argue whether these stories were born from real encounters or from imagination stretched thin by fear and fatigue. Whatever the truth, the tension is real. You start out cautiously, eyes scanning the trees and brush as you follow the trail. The terrain is uneven, with patches of muddy ground left by recent rain. You slip a few times, catching yourself on the wagon's side, feeling the sticky pull of mud at your boot. The oxen trudge forward, their pace slower than usual, their heads low and tail flicking. By midday, the sun burns away the last of the mist, but it does little to ease the unease clinging to the group. The air grows hot and heavy, the humidity pressing down like a blanket. Flies swarm around your face, and the sweat running down your back feels thick and clammy. The trail narrows between low hills, the path winding through rocky outcrops and clusters of scrubby trees. You hear a sharp crack and a muffled curse. Someone's wagon has hit a hidden root, sending a wheel askew. You pause to help, the rhythmic creak of wood and clink of metal filling the air as repairs are made. You glance around uneasily, half expecting something to emerge from the shadows. As the sun dips toward late afternoon, you set up camp early. The clearing seems calm enough, but the strange tension hasn't lifted. You build the fire a little higher than usual, casting longer shadows into the trees. Dinner is quiet, hardtack and beans, with a few scraps of jerky, and everyone seems to eat faster than usual, glancing over shoulders between bites. As dusk falls, the noises begin. Low rustling from a brush, a distant snap of branch, the faint echo of what might be a growl or just a wind. You sit closer to the fire, your rifle within easy reach, your hands tight on your knees. Someone whispers about a lone wolf, while another mentions bays. But the stories drift to older fears, about spirits of the land, about lost travelers who still wander these hills, about creatures that walk on two legs by night and vanish by day. The air grows colder, and the fire sputters as it dampens in the thickening fog. You shift uneasily, your back to the wagon, trying to watch all directions at once. The shadows dance longer now, flickering shapes that tease at the edges of vision. Your breath comes shallow, is straining for any sound beyond the fire's crackle and the quiet murmurs of your companion. And then, a rustle, louder this time, closer. The oxen shift nervously, their breath huffing out in quick, startled snort. One of them lets out a low, frightened bellow, tugging at the harness. You rise slowly, gripping your rifle, heart hammering. The firelight casts everything in stark relief, the trees beyond painted in black and orange. You stare into the dark, willing your eyes to pierce the shadows. But nothing comes. The noises fade, leaving only the sound of your own breath and the distant creak of the wagon settling for the night. Someone lets out a shaky laugh, too loud in the silence. The tension breaks just a little, but not enough for comfort. You return to your blanket, pulling it around your shoulders, but sleep is fitful and broken. You dream of shifting shadows, of glowing eyes in the dark, of footsteps just beyond the edge of vision. You wake often, listening to the night's whispers, the rustle of leaves, the quiet sigh of the wind. When dawn finally comes, it's with a sigh of relief from the entire camp. The sky turns pale gold, the sun rising slowly, and the strange night noises fade into memory. You break camp quickly, eager to put distance between you and the eerie clearing. As you hitch the oxen and start forward, someone mutters, "Let's not stop here again." You couldn't agree more. The sun rises with a heat that feels almost personal, as if it's specifically targeting you and your exhausted companion. The air is dry but thick with dust, and every step sends puffs of it swirling around your ankle. You can feel it settling on your skin, sticking to the sweat that beads across your brow and down your spine. The trail ahead is marked with faint wagon ruts, disappearing into a shimmering haze of heat. You trudge forward, the oxen plodding along with weary determination. Their sides are coated with a fine layer of dust, their flanks heaving as they pull the wagon. The wheels creak with each turn, a sound you come to dread for its familiarity and its ominous undertone. By mid-morning, the sun is a merciless disk overhead, and the prairie seems to waver under its glare. The ground cracks underfoot, dry and splintered. Someone remarks bitterly that it feels like you're walking across a giant, cracked frying pan. A thin, mirthless laugh follows, but it dies quickly, leaving only the rhythmic clop of hooves and the grinding crunch of wagon wheel. The day drags, the heat growing more oppressive with each hour. Your throat feels raw, your tongue thick and dry. The last of the water was rationed sparingly this morning, and now there's none left. You glance at the sky, willing a cloud to drift by, but the sky remains stubbornly clear. A faint wind stays, but it brings no relief. Instead, it lifts the dust into swirling eddies, blinding you momentarily and stinging your eyes. You cover your face with a rag, but it does little good. The dust clings to your skin, works its way into your nose and mouth, coating your teeth with grit. The oxen stumble, their pace faltering, and you fear they'll collapse from heat exhaustion. Historians still argue whether dust storms were common on the trail or rare enough to be exaggerated by settlers' journals. But as the wind picks up and the dust thickens, you're convinced it's no exaggeration. The air turns brown and choking, reducing visibility to mere feet. You call out to your companion, but the wind steals your voice. The oxen bellow, panicked, and you tighten your grip on the rein. You push forward blindly, hoping to clear the worst of the storm. The world narrows to a haze of dust and grit, the sun a pale smudge overhead. You stumble, tripping over unseen rocks, coughing violently as the dust claws at your throat. Your eyes stream, your hands shake, and you feel the oppressive weight of the storm pressing down on you. Finally, the wind begins to ease, the dust settling into a thick, choking layer on everything. The wagons, the oxen, your clothes, your very skin. You collapse against the side of the wagon, gasping for breath, your mouth dry and tasting of date. The oxen stand trembling, their flanks heaving, their eyes dull and dust-crusted. Someone pulls a water barrel from a wagon, tipping it to catch the last precious drops. You sip cautiously, the water tasting of wood and dust, but it's wet, and that's enough. A few of your companions curse the weather, the trail, the very idea of this journey. You can't blame them. You make camp earlier than planned, the exhaustion settling deep into your bone. The campfire struggles to catch in the swirling breeze, the flames sputtering against the lingering dust. Dinner is sparse, hardtack soaked in the last of the water, a few scraps of jerky chewed mechanically, the air taste of grit and ash. As night falls, the temperature drops suddenly, a sharp contrast to the daytime heat. You pull your blanket tighter around your shoulders, but the cold seeps in. The oxen huddle together, their breath visible in the cooling air. Someone starts a low, mournful tune on a fiddle, the notes drifting through the camp like a lullaby for the broken and weary. You lie awake, staring at the stars that emerge in the clear, cold sky. They look close enough to touch, but they offer no comfort, no warmth. You think about the day, the storm, the choking dust, the endless, blinding light. You wonder how many more days like this you can endure, how much more you can take before something gives way. Eventually, sleep claims you, though it's shallow and broken by dreams of choking, of blinding dust, of a sun that never sets. You wake often, coughing, your throat raw and your body aching, but you're still here. You're still moving forward, even if the trail seems determined to grind you into the earth. You wake to a gray, heavy sky, as if the dust from the day before has blotted out the sun. The air is still thick and dry, but the oppressive heat has lifted just enough to leave you chilled. You pull your coat tighter around you, wincing as stiff muscles protest. The oxen stand close, their breath visible, their heads hanging low with fatigue. Breakfast is almost laughably thin, just a strip of jerky passed from hand to hand, broken into smaller and smaller pieces until everyone has a bite. Someone tries to make a joke about prairie gourmet, but it falls flat in the cold, tired air. Supplies are running dangerously. The flour barrel, once brimming with optimism and the smell of home, is now scraped clean. The salt pork is gone, save for a few scraps are riddled with gristle and bone they are almost inedible. You pull yourself onto the wagon seat, feeling every bruise and ache from the day before. The wagon creaks forward, wheels groaning under the weight of too much hope and too little food. The oxen plod along, their gait slow and uneven. You watch as one of them stumbles slightly, catching itself just in time. You make a mental note to check its hooves at the next stop, though you're not sure what you'll do if there's an issue. The trail today winds through a stretch of scrubland, dotted with low bushes and wiry grass. The ground is hard and cracked, the wagon wheels leaving shallow tracks in the dry earth. You spot animal tracks, deer, maybe, or antelope, but they're old and faded, and there's no sign of the creatures themselves. Your stomach growls loudly, and you glance around sheepishly. You're not alone. Everyone looks pinched and hollow-eyed, lips pale and cracked. By midday, someone proposes a hunting party. You're not sure it's worth the effort, but the prospect of fresh meat is enough to rally a few volunteers. You join them, rifle in hand, stepping off the trail and into the brush. The air is dry and still, every sound, your footsteps, the rustle of grass, the faint creak of your pack, amplified by the silence. After an hour of fruitless wandering, you spot movement. A jackrabbit darts from behind a bush, its legs a blur of motion. You raise your rifle, but your hands shake from hunger and exhaustion, and the shot goes wide. The rabbit disappears into the undergrowth. Someone curses softly, and you share a grim look. There's nothing to be done but keep walking. Eventually, you find a patch of low bushes heavy with berries. They are small and dark, their skin slightly wrinkled. You hesitate, recalling stories of poisonous plants, but hunger overrules caution. Historians still argue whether settlers knew enough to distinguish safe berries from dangerous ones, but you're too hungry to care. You fill your hands, popping the berries into your mouth. They are tart and bitter, but they feel the hollow ache in your stomach. You return to the wagons with your meager haul, just enough for a small handful each. It's not much, but it's something. The party eats in near silence, the sound of chewing and the occasional cough filling the air. That evening, you set up camp in a shallow dip in the land, the wagons forming a loose circle for shelter. The fire burns low, fed by scraps of dry grass and twigs. Someone tries to start a story, a tale of a pioneer who found a hidden valley of plenty, but it falters and fades. The group is too tired, too hollow, to pretend. You lie down on your blanket, the cold seeping up from the ground. Your stomach rumbles quietly, but there's nothing left to eat. You stare at the sky, counting stars, letting your mind drift to thoughts of home. You picture a warm kitchen, the smell of fresh bread, the laughter of familiar voices. The memory feels distant, almost unreal. You drift into sleep, dreams full of food you can't taste and warmth you can't feel. You wake in the middle of the night, throat dry, head pounding. You reach for the water barrel, but it's nearly empty. You take the smallest sip you can, just enough to wet your lips, then settle back onto your blanket. As you close your eyes, you hear the faint rustle of movement nearby, just outside the circle wagon. Your heart stutters, and you sit up, straining to listen. It's faint, a whisper of sound, but it's there. You glance at the others, but no one else stays. You grip your rifle tightly, waiting, but the noise fades into the night. You lie back down, heart still racing, and finally drift into an uneasy sleep. You dream of full tables and heavy plates, of water so clear and cold it stings your teeth. But when you wake, the trail is waiting, and your stomach is still empty. Morning comes grudgingly, the sky streaked with thin, washed-out pinks and golds, a warning more than a greeting. You rise slowly, every muscle aching, and stretch against the stiffness. The air is cool, but the promise of heat later looms in the heavy stillness. The oxen are sluggish today, their flanks heaving and their heads drooping. You know they're as hungry and tired as you are. The trail ahead seems deceptively flat, leading toward the broad, sluggish line of the Snake River. From a distance, it glimmers invitingly, as if it might wash away the grime and fatigue caking your body. But you've learned not to trust the landscape's illusion. You've heard too many stories of the river's treachery, of wagons tipped and swept away, of lives lost in the cold, swirling current. As your group approaches the riverbank, the air grows thick with a scent of mud and decaying vegetation. The banks are wide and flat, the water brown and churning, flecked with foam. You can see the remnants of other crossings, half-sunken wagons, shattered planks, and piles of tangled debris caught along the edges. Your stomach clenches at the sight. The decision is made to cork the wagon beds and float them across. You help smear the seams with a thick paste of tar and pitch, your hands sticky and blackened. It's slow, messy work, and the smell clings to your skin, seeping into your clothes. The oxen are unhitched and driven downstream to ford at a shallower crossing. You watch them with tight nerves, praying they make it. Historians still argue whether the Snake River's danger was overblown by fearful travelers or whether its shifting currents genuinely pose a deadly threat. As you watch the first wagon push into the water, you're inclined to believe the latter. The river surges around the wheels, tugging and pulling. The wagon rocks alarmingly, the logs creak and groan, but it holds for a few feet. Then, with a sickening lurch, it tilts sharply, spilling supplies into the muddy water. Cries echo across the bank as people scramble to save what they can. Your turn comes sooner than you'd like. You drive your wagon into the shallows, the oxen already on the far bank, waiting anxiously. The wagon wobbles as the current catches it, the water sloshing against the sides. You lean into the push, guiding it with your shoulder and a long pole, heart hammering in your chest. The river grips the wagon like a giant hand, twisting and pulling. You shout encouragement, mostly to yourself, but the noise is swallowed by the raw water. For a terrifying moment, you feel the wagon shift beneath you, the current pushing against the wheel. You dig the pole deep into the riverbed, straining with all your might. The wagon rights itself, barely, and with a final surge, it scrapes up onto the far bank. You collapse against the side, panting, your legs trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. The oxen are waiting, stamping the ground impatiently, their muzzles flecked with foam. You hitch them back up, grateful for their patience, and survey the damage. A barrel of flour is gone, swept away downstream. Your blankets are soaked through, and one of the spare wheels is cracked. But you're across. You made it. As the others follow, the river claims more than a few wagons and supplies. The mood is grim, the loss is heavy. You share quiet words with your companion, offering what small comfort you can. Someone remarks darkly that the Snake River's taken its toll on more than just goods. It's taken spirits, too. That evening, camp is made on the far bank, a soggy, disorganized sprawl of wet wagons and dripping supplies. You hang blankets and clothes to dry, though the air is still damp and heavy with river mist. Dinner is a thin stew made from salvaged beans and the last of the jerky, boiled over a smoky fire. The mood is subdued, voices hushed, eyes dull with exhaustion. As the sun sets, the river glistens like a winding snake of gold and shadow. You sit by the fire, staring at its shifting surface, listening to the murmur of water and the low hum of insects. Someone starts a quiet story about a man who crossed the Snake River and swore he saw a woman's face in the current, calling him to join her. No one laughed. You wrap your blanket tighter and stare into the flames, willing sleep to come. That night, you dream of the river, not as water, but as a living thing, coiling and hissing, its currents tugging at your legs, pulling you down. You wake suddenly, heart pounding, the echo of rushing water in your ears. The fires burn low, casting thin shadows against the wagon. You listen to the night sounds, the distant murmur of the river, the rustle of leaves, and wonder if you'll ever trust calm water again. You wake to a thin mist clinging to the ground, the air heavy with dampness and the faint, metallic scent of river water. Your clothes, which you left out to dry, are still clammy, and as you pull them on, they cling uncomfortably to your skin. The oxen are sluggish, stamping and snorting, their muzzles still flecked with foam from yesterday's crossing. Their bellies are sunken, and you can almost feel their ribs under their hide. Breakfast is nearly non-existent. A few scraps of hardtack are passed around, the pieces crumbling in your hands like dry parchment. Someone finds a tin of old coffee grounds and tries to coax them into a passable drink, but it's bitter, gritty, and tastes faintly of river silt. You force it down anyway, your body too starved for caffeine to care. As the wagons creak into motion, you can't help but notice how many are missing from the line. Some families didn't make it across the river, their wagons lost to the current, their dreams scattered along the muddy banks. Others have simply disappeared, choosing to abandon the trail rather than risk the long, grinding miles ahead. The trail today winds along the river's edge, the ground soggy and churned to mud by countless wheels and hooves. The sun breaks through the mist as the morning wears on, but it's a weak, watery light that does little to dry the land. You can hear the squelch of mud underfoot, the steady drip of water from the trees, and the occasional sharp creak of a wheel that sounds just a little too strained for comfort. By midday, you reach a campsite known among travelers as one of the worst spots on the trail, a low, marshy hollow marked by toppled wagons and scattered bones. The place has a reputation, whispered about in half-joking, half-serious tone. They call it the campsite of the damned, and as you look around, you can see why. The ground is littered with remnants of previous party, broken wheels, rusted pots, tattered scraps of canvas. You find a child's toy, an old wooden doll, its face smudged with date, its arm missing. Someone else uncovers a boot, the leather stiff and cracked, the sole worn thin. It's clear that this spot has been witness to more than one tragedy. Historians still argue whether sites like this were abandoned out of necessity or simply bad luck. But as you set up camp, you can't help but feel the weight of all those who came before. The air feels thick, almost oppressive, and the shadows lengthen quickly as the sun dips behind a line of trees. Dinner is a silent affair. A few thin strips of salted meat are boiled into a weak broth, shared sparingly among the group. Someone tries to lighten the mood with a story about a prospector who struck gold nearby, but it falls flat against the backdrop of the damp, dreary campsite. You eat mechanically, barely tasting the food. As darkness settles, the mood shifts from exhaustion to unease. Strange noises drift from the trees, the rustle of leaves, the soft crack of a branch, the faint splash of water in the nearby river. You catch yourself glancing over your shoulder, half expecting to see someone, or something, standing at the edge of the firelight. One of the younger travelers swears they saw a figure moving through the trees, pale and silent. Another laughs nervously, suggesting it's just the wind or the trick of the light. But the laughter fades quickly, replaced by the quiet crackle of the fire and the occasional cough or sniffle from the group. You lie down on your blanket, pulling it tight around your shoulders, but sleep feels impossible. Your mind conjures images of ghostly figures, a wagon sinking into mud, of voices calling out from the dark. You listen to the night, the wind whispering through the trees, the low hum of insects, the distant, mournful cry of an owl. And then you hear it, a soft, rhythmic thudding, faint but distinct, like footsteps approaching through the mud. Your heart races, your hands clench the edges of your blanket. The fire flickers, casting shifting shadows that dance and twist against the trees. You hold your breath, straining to listen, but the sound fades, swallowed by the night, leaving only your hammering pulse in your ears. You tell yourself it was nothing, a trick of the wind, perhaps, or an animal. But as you finally drift into an uneasy sleep, you can't shake the feeling that you're not alone in this place. When morning comes, the campsite looks no different than it did the night before. The shadows are gone, the mist is lifted, and the trail stretches onward, indifferent to your fears. You pack up quickly, eager to leave the hollow behind. As you glance back one last time, you think you see a figure standing at the edge of the trees, but when you blink, it's gone. The morning starts with a low rumble in the sky, a sound you first mistake for distant thunder. But as you look up, the sky is a harsh, metallic gray, thick with rolling clouds. The air feels heavy, as though it's waiting for something. The oxen shift uneasily, their tails flicking, heads tossing as if they can sense the coming change. You and your companions break camp quickly, working in near silence. The oppressive weight of the strange campsite lingers, but now it's mixed with the urgency of oncoming weather. As you check the wagon's load, you notice that one of the wheels is splintered badly from yesterday's struggle. It won't last long if the trail gets anywhere. By mid-morning, the first drops of rain begin to fall. Cool at first, almost a relief against the heat that's clung to you for days. But soon it becomes a steady, insistent drizzle, soaking your clothes, making the canvas of the wagon heavy and sagging. The trail turns slick, the dirt path transforming into a churn of mud that clings to boots and wheels alike. The oxen struggle with each step, their hooves slipping, the wagon wheels sinking deep into the muck. You push alongside them, boots sliding, mud pulling at your legs like a living thing. The cold seeps in, chilling you to the bone. Your breath comes in ragged gasps, fogging in the air. Historians still argue whether the worst challenges on the trail came from man or nature, but right now, nature is winning. A sudden shout from up ahead snaps your attention forward. One of the wagons has hit a rut, the wheel breaking with a splintering crack. The wagon tips dangerously, the load shifting. Barrels tumble into the mud, flour, and supplies mixing into a paste. You and others rush to help, heaving and pulling, trying to right the wagon before it collapses completely. Your hands slip on the slick wood, your clothes plastered with mud. The rain intensifies, turning the trail into a stream of brown water that rushes past your boots. The sky darkens further, flashes of lightning illuminating the landscape in stark, eerie relief. Thunder rumbles closer, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to shake the ground beneath you. As you finally get the broken wagon upright, a gust of wind howls down the trail, rattling the canvas covers, snapping branches overhead. The fire you managed to start earlier sputters and dies, drowned by rain and wind. Someone shouts something about shelter, but there's nowhere to go, no trees thick enough, no caves, no protection from the storm. The group huddles close to the wagons, tops pulled tight, trying to shield the supplies and themselves from the deluge. You sit beneath the wagon, knees drawn to your chest, listening to the rain drum against the wood above you, feeling the cold seep into your bone. Your teeth chatter, your hands shake, but you can't move. Every attempt to step away is met with more mud, more slipping, more exhaustion. Lightning forks across the sky, illuminating the trail and the drenched, shivering figures of your companion. For a moment, the scene looks like a painting. Figures hunched against a wrathful sky. The wagons tilted and mired, the landscape flattened under sheets of rain. It's almost beautiful, in a cool, indifferent way. By evening, the storm has eased, but the damage is done. Supplies are ruined, soaked and muddy. Some of the barrels have been lost entirely, swept away by the runoff. The trail ahead is a river of mud, the ruts deep and treacherous. You manage to light a small fire with the driest kindling you can find, but it smokes more than it flames. Dinner is a miserable affair of soggy hardtack and watered-down beans, eaten with numb fingers and clenched jaws. As darkness settles, a new chill creeps into the air. The wind dies down, but the temperature drops sharply. The dampness clings to you, seeping into your bones, making every movement feel heavier. You pull your blanket tight, but it offers little comfort against the cold. Someone starts a quiet tune on a tin whistle, the notes thin and wavering in the damp air. It's a feeble attempt at normalcy, but it's something. You drift into a fitful sleep, broken by dreams of storms and wagons collapsing, of endless mud pulling you down into the earth. You wake often, shivering, your hands numb, listening to the crackling of the dying fire and the faint drip of water from the wagon above. In the morning, the trail will be worse. The mud will cling, the wheels will slip, and the cold will gnaw at your resolve. But for now, you close your eyes, telling yourself that this is just another night, another obstacle to endure, another trial to pass. You hope you will have the strength to keep moving when the sun finally rises. Morning breaks with a low, rumbling growl of a wagon wheel turning reluctantly against thick, sucking mud. The light is dull, filtered through low clouds and the last remnants of the storm. You wake with a shudder, your blanket heavy with dampness, your clothes stiff with dried mud. The fire is long dead, and the air is thick with a mingled sense of wet earth, wood smoke, and stale sweat. You stretch, feeling every ache and bruise as though you've aged years overnight. The others are stirring too, their faces pale and drawn, voices low and clipped. There's no breakfast, not even the bitter coffee drag. The last of the flour was ruined in yesterday's storm, and the remaining beans are a mushy mess at the bottom of a leaking barrel. Someone suggests stretching what's left by adding water, but it's already more water than food. As you harness the oxen, you notice one of them limping, its legs swollen and raw from a slipped hoof in the mud. It refuses to put weight on it, and you feel a pang of helplessness. Without both animals pulling, your wagon isn't going anywhere. A few of your companions offer half-hearted suggestions. Lighten the load, redistribute supplies, maybe even abandon some of your gear. The idea tastes bitter. Historians still argue whether pioneers really abandoned precious items along the trail as often as legend claims. But today, you see it firsthand. One family nearby dumps a chest of books and linens into the mud, their faces tight with frustration and fear. Another breaks down an extra barrel and burns it for firewood. You stare at your own wagon, trying to decide what you can live without. A bundle of spare clothes, a crate of tin dishes, gone. It's still not enough. You make the difficult choice to leave behind one of the heavier trunks. Its contents a mix of tools and sentimental trinkets. As you close the lid for the last time and push it into the mud, you feel a strange mixture of guilt and relief. The trail demands sacrifices, and today it demanded yours. With the wagon lightened and the limping oxen coaxed into a makeshift harness, you push forward. The trail is a churning mess of mud and ruts, each step a battle against sinking wheels and slipping boots. The oxen grunt and strain, their bodies trembling with exhaustion. The wagon creaks and lurches, but it moves. The afternoon brings a new challenge. Tempers flare, the stress of dwindling supplies, the cold, and the mud has everyone on edge. Arguments erupt over whose turn it is to fetch water, who spilled the last of the beans, who's hoarding what little food remained. Shouts echo along the line of wagon, sharp words slicing through the thick, wet air. Someone accuses another of stealing, and for a moment, fists are raised. You and a few others step between them, calming the situation before it explodes. The tension simmers but doesn't break, leaving a bitter undercurrent that flavors every interaction. Dinner that night is a sullen affair. The thin gruel is ladled into cups, eaten quickly and in silence. No one tells stories or plays music. The fire burns low, fed by scraps of broken crates and whatever dry grass can be found. You sit close, staring into the flames, feeling their warmth on your chilled hands and face. You think back to home, to the warmth of a hearth and the clatter of familiar voices. The contrast is stark, almost unbearable. You wonder what your family would think if they could see you now, mud-caked, hollow-eyed, sitting in a circle of strangers who barely trust each other. As the sky darkens, a wind stays, carrying the scent of wet grass and something faintly metallic, blood, maybe, or just a sharp tang of fear. You glance at the oxen, huddled together near the wagons, their heads low, their sides heaving. One of them lets out a low, mournful bellow that echoes across the camp. You settle into your blanket, trying to find a position that doesn't press against your bruises. The cold seeps in again, and you pull the fabric tighter around you, listening to the wind, the creak of wagon wheels settling into mud, and the faint, unhappy murmurs of your companion. You dream of food, thick slices of bread, roast meats, sweet fruit. But the dreams turn sour, shifting into images of bony hands reaching for your plate, shadowy figures crouched over your shoulder, whispering in voices you can't understand. You wake with a start, heart racing, your mouth dry and tasting of ash. You sit up, rubbing your face, trying to shake off the lingering unease. In the distance, you hear the faint clatter of a wagon wheel, the low murmur of a voice. But when you look, there's nothing there, just the wind and the dark shapes of the trees, and the cold, indifferent stars. The morning greets you with a haze of frost clinging to the ground, a brittle white sheen over the mud that crackles softly underfoot. You shiver as you rise, your breath puffing in front of your face like smoke. The oxen, huddled together for warmth through the night, lift their heads but don't move until you rouse them, their bodies stiff and trembling. The frost is beautiful, in a way, silvered grass and delicate icicle, but it only underscores how cruel the trail can be. You gather with the others for a quick tally of supplies. The inventory is grim, a few pounds of flour that have clumped into hard, damp bowls, a handful of beans, and a scattering of broken hardtack. Spirits are low, tempers even lower. A few people argue in hushed voices over who's eating more than their share, but there's no real fight left in anyone. And then, like a shift in the wind, the women step forward. One of them, a broad-shouldered woman with a braid wound tightly around her head, claps her hands sharply. "Enough," she says, her voice clear and cutting through the morning haze. She starts giving orders. One group to scout for edible plants or small game, another to boil what water remains for the oxen. Someone retrieves a cast-iron pot and sets it over the meager fire to make a thin, hot broth with the last of the bean. It's as if the trail's brutal lessons have snapped everyone into focus. The women move with a kind of quiet efficiency, gathering wood, repacking the wagons, tending to the injured ox. One produces a length of cloth from the bottom of a trunk and binds the animal's leg, speaking in low, soothing tones as she wept. Another woman pulls out a carefully hoarded bag of dried herbs and adds them to the watery broth, the scent of sage and wild onion lifting faintly into the cold air. Historians still argue whether it was the women who held the wagon trains together or if that a romanticized image. But watching them now, calm, determined, faces set against the wind, you're convinced there's truth in the tale. As the day wears on, the group's dynamic shifts subtly. The men, usually loud and opinionated, fall into the background, deferring to the women's quiet authority. Tasks are assigned and carried out without argument. The fire is coaxed back to life, the oxen calmed and fed, and the wagons reloaded with greater care. You're sent with a few others to scout the nearby hills for any sign of game or forage. The landscape is harsh, rocky outcrops, thin stands of brush, and dry grass that crackles underfoot. But there are signs of life. You spot a few rabbits darting between the rocks and manage to catch one with a well-placed shot. It's scrawny, barely enough meat to share, but it's something. Another scout returns with a handful of bitter greens and a few small tubers, dug from the hard-packed earth. By evening, the camp is transformed, not into a feast, but into something resembling hope. The rabbit is stewed with the greens and the last of the herbs, producing a thin but savory broth that warms your belly and lifts spirits. The fire burns brighter, the smoke rising in steady plume. Someone starts humming an old song, and others join in, their voices tentative at first but growing stronger with each verse. You sit close to the fire, feeling the warmth seep into your chill bones, listening to the low murmur of conversation. The women speak of home, of recipes passed down from mothers and grandmothers, of gardens long since abandoned. They laugh quietly, sharing memories that seem to stitch the group together more tightly than any rope or canvas. As the stars emerge, bright against the velvet sky, you find yourself relaxing for the first time in days. The shadows beyond the firelight still shift and whisper, but they feel less threatening now. The crackling fire, the soft hum of voices, the smell of broth thickening in the pot, it all feels like a fragile barrier against the night's cold indifference. You drift into sleep with a belly that's not quite empty, wrapped in a blanket that smells faintly of sage and smoke. Your dreams are softer than before, filled with images of home, of familiar faces, of warmth and light. In the middle of the night, you wake briefly to the sound of someone tending the fire, adding another branch to keep it burning through the dark hours. You see the silhouette of a woman there, her hands steady, her back straight, her face calm in the flickering glow. You close your eyes again, reassured, and let sleep take you. You wake to a sky tinged with orange, the faint hint of dawn promising a new day. But as you stretch and rise from your blanket, a sharp scent catches in your nostrils. Smoke, but not from your campfire. It's thick and acrid, stinging your throat, and as you look up, you see a dark plume rising to the west. Someone shouts, pointing toward the horizon. The air carries a low, ominous crackling sound, a noise that prickles the hairs on the back of your neck. It's wildfire. The group erupts into frantic activity. The women who had taken control the day before now move with rapid precision, directing the packing of wagons, the hitching of oxen, the gathering of scattered supplies. The fire isn't yet upon you, but the wind is picking up, and you can see flecks of ash dancing in the air, settling on your clothes and skin. You scramble to load the wagon, throwing in supplies haphazardly, your hands trembling as the smell of burning brush grows stronger. The oxen stamp and snort, their eyes rolling with fear. Someone struggles to calm them, but they pull against the harnesses, their hooves churning up clods of dirt and mud. The trail ahead dips into a shallow valley, the scrub and grass already dry and brittle. You urge the oxen forward, feeling the rising heat against your back, the wind carrying the scent of burning wood and scorched earth. The air turns thick, choking, making every breath a struggle. Historians still argue whether wildfires were as common on the trail as some journals suggest, or whether memory exaggerated threat. Today, it feels real enough. The flames aren't yet visible, but the signs are there, the orange glow on the horizon, the thickening smoke, the rising temperature. The group moves as fast as it can, but the trail is rough and the wagons heavy. Wheels sink into ruts, oxen balk and lunge. People shout instructions that are lost in the roar of wind and crackling fire. You push alongside the wagon, feeling the heat singe your skin, your throat roar with smoke. A sudden gust of wind brings a shower of embers, glowing red against the dull light. Someone's canvas cover catches, and the fire leaps eagerly along the fabric. Shouts rise as people scramble to beat out the flames with wet blankets and fists. You feel the panic rise in your chest, a wave of helpless terror, but you force yourself to focus, to keep moving. The trail narrows ahead, cutting through a stand of blackened trees, their branches stripped and skeletal. The smoke thickens, reducing visibility to a few feet, and the air is filled with a constant shower of ash. You wrap a damp cloth over your mouth and nose, squinting against the sting. The oxen lurch forward, driven by fear and the instinct to escape. The wagon rocks dangerously, the wheels catching on stones and roots. You stumble, nearly falling, but a hand grabs your arm and steadies you, a fellow traveler, equally smoke-streaked and grim-faced. Together, you push through the worst of it, the wagon emerging into a small clearing where the air is clearer, the fire a distant crackle behind you. The others follow, coughing and gasping, their faces streaked with ash and sweat. You collapse onto the ground, sucking in great gulps of fresher air, your body trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. Once the immediate danger has passed, the group gathers to take stock. Some supplies are lost, burned or abandoned in the scramble. A few wagons are scorched, their canvas covers blackened and charred. One of the oxen is missing, panicked and bolting into the smoke. A small group volunteers to search for it, while the rest focus on salvaging what they can. Dinner that night is a hurried, silent affair. The sky glows faintly with the orange of the distant fire, and the air is still thick with the scent of smoke. You chew on a scrap of dried meat, the taste flat and bitter against the backdrop of burned earth. Someone tries to lighten the mood with a joke, but it falls flat, and the conversation fades into silence. As darkness falls, you sit by the dim fire, listening to the crackling of embers and the soft murmur of exhausted voices. You think about how close you came to disaster, how fragile this journey really is. You remember the sharp heat of the fire, the choking smoke, the blind terror in the oxen's eyes. And yet, you're still here, battered, bruised, and singed, but alive. You watch the distant glow of the fire on the horizon, the stars dimmed by the haze, and wonder what tomorrow will bring. You drift into sleep with the acrid scent of smoke still clinging to your clothes, your dreams filled with flickering flames and the endless, grinding trail ahead. Morning comes, though it hardly feels like it. The sky is a dull gray, thick with the remnants of smoke that drift like lazy ghosts across the horizon. Your clothes reek of ash, your throat feels raw, and your eyes sting as though you've been crying all night. The air tastes faintly metallic, like burnt copper, and every breath feels heavy. The group rises slowly, stiff and sore from yesterday's sprint from the fire. Breakfast is a grim affair, just the last few crumbs of hardtack and a watery stew that's more broth than substance. The water tastes of ash, the beans soft and nearly tasteless. You force it down because you have to, but every swallow feels like swallowing regret. As you pack up the wagon, one of the scouts returns, leading the missing ox. It's skittish, eyes wide and rolling, but it's uninjured. The scout, an older woman with hair streaked gray, pats the animal's flank and mutters a few words under her breath. Some say it's just superstition, others call it a blessing. Historians still argue whether the settlers' reliance on folk remedies and superstitions did more harm than good. But in this moment, you're grateful for any luck. The trail today is smoother but no less dangerous. The ground is littered with charred branches and fallen logs, evidence of the fire's path. The air smells of wet ash and scorched grass. As you move, you notice strange little piles of stones or twisted bits of cloth tied to tree branches, tokens left behind by previous travelers. Some say they are offerings, others think they are warnings. Either way, they make you uneasy. Around midday, someone coughs sharply, a wet rattling sound that cuts through the murmurs of conversation. It's followed by another, and then another. You glance around, noticing pale faces and trembling hands. Cholera, dysentery, whispers swirl like smoke among the group. The fear is palpable, a weight heavier than the trail dust. One of the older men swears by a sure cure he remembers from his grandfather. Mustard plasters, boiled willow bark, even whiskey with a dash of gunpowder. Desperation drives some to try anything. You watch as a few brave souls force down bitter concoction, their faces twisting in disgust. Others refuse, muttering about old wives' tales. You tend to your own supplies, double-checking the barrels, readying the canvas, securing the harnesses. But your hands shake, and you can't help glancing at the coughing travelers with dread. The trail has taught you that no one is safe, not from the elements, not from disease, and certainly not from bad luck. Dinner is sparse and silent. Someone sets a bowl of thin stew over the fire, the smell barely rising above the lingering scent of smoke. You eat quickly, eyes scanning the shadows, listening for any hint of trouble. The coughing continues, a grim soundtrack to the night. As darkness settles, you feel the weight of exhaustion dragging at your limbs, but sleep is elusive. You lie awake, listening to the soft rustle of the wind through the trees, the crackle of the fire, the occasional groan of a wagon shifting under its load. You think of the strange tokens you saw earlier, the twisted cloth and stacked stone. You wonder who left them, and whether they are watching even now. Your mind drifts to stories you heard back in Independence. Tales of spirits that walk the trail, of ghosts of those who never made it to Oregon, of figures glimpsed in the corner of the eye. You shake the thoughts away, telling yourself it's just superstition. But when you close your eyes, you dream of pale faces emerging from the trees, of hands reaching out from the earth, of whispers in a language you don't understand. You wake to the sound of coughing, louder now, echoing around the camp. Someone calls out, and you rise, heart pounding. A man lies near the fire, pale and shaking, his lips tinged blue. His family gathers around him, voices rising in panic. You hear muttered prayers, whispered curses, the sharp crack of someone's voice breaking as they plead for help. You stand back, helpless, feeling the weight of inevitability settle over the camp. Cholera isn't something you can outrun, and superstitions, no matter how comforting, won't change its course. You watch as a man's breathing slows, then stops, his family collapsing into sobs. Someone pulls a blanket over his face, and the camp falls into a heavy silence. The trail has claimed another. You sit by the dying fire, staring into the embers, listening to the wind whisper through the trees. You think of the tokens again, of the stories of spirits and curses. You wonder how many more you'll lose before this journey ends. And yet, when dawn comes, you'll pack up your wagon, hitch the oxen, and move on, because there's nothing else to do. Morning creeps over the horizon like a thief, pale and hesitant. You awake long before it comes, sitting by the cold ashes of last night's fire. The coughing is quieter now, not because it's better, but because the worst cases have gone silent. The camp moves sluggishly, voices hushed, faces pale with grief and exhaustion. The oxen are restless, snorting and stamping in the brittle grass. The trail ahead snakes upward into rocky hills, the kind that promise broken wheels, scraped chins, and a whole new set of challenges. You stretch stiff limbs and gather your things, feeling the weight of every mile you traveled. The air tastes faintly of frost and smoke, as if the wildfire and the night's chill have joined forces to sap your resolve. As you coax the oxen into harness, one of them balks, pulling back sharply. You follow its gaze and spot a narrow path ahead, the trail clinging precariously to the edge of a cliff. The drop is steep, the path narrow, barely wide enough for a wagon's width. You swallow hard, heart sinking into your boot. This is no ordinary hill. Historians still argue whether trail guides exaggerated the danger of these cliffside passes, or if their fears were justified. Looking at the sheer drop, the loose stones, and the narrow track ahead, you don't care what the history books say. You would turn back if you could, but there's no other way forward. The group debates briefly. Some argue for taking it slow, others for unhitching the oxen and lowering the wagons by hand. In the end, necessity wins. There's no time or energy for elaborate plans. You lash down the supplies tighter, check the wheel braces, and take a deep breath. The oxen step forward hesitantly, hooves scraping against the loose stone. The wagon creaks and groans, the wheels catching on rocks and teetering dangerously close to the edge. You walk beside it, one hand on the yoke, the other brace against the wagon side, heart hammering so loud you can barely hear the wind. Halfway along the pass, a stone gives way beneath one of the oxen's hooves. The animal stumbles, pulling sharply to the side. The wagon tilt, the wheels skidding perilously close to the cliff's edge. You shout, leaping forward to steady it, your muscles screaming with the effort. The wagon rights itself, but just barely. A barrel tumbles from the back, bouncing down the slope with a sickening thud before disappearing into the void. You pause, panting, every nerve on edge. The oxen snort and pull against the harness, eager to move away from the edge. You can't blame them. Step by agonizing step, you guide the wagon forward, the trail narrowing to a breath's width between safety and disaster. Your boots slide on gravel, your hands ache from gripping the wood, but you don't stop. Finally, the path widens just enough to breathe. You pull the wagon onto a flatter stretch, slumping against the side, your legs trembling with exhaustion and relief. The others follow, each wagon creeping forward like a hesitant animal, the travelers' faces tight with concentration and fear. When the last wagon clears the pass, there's a moment of collective silence. Someone lets out a shaky laugh. Another offers a quiet prayer of thanks. The oxen stand heaving, their flanks streaked with sweat and dust. But they're alive. You're all alive. The trail descends into a rocky ravine, where trickling stream winds through boulders. You pause to let the oxen drink, watching as they lower their heads eagerly, tongues lapping at the muddy water. The stream is shallow but sweet, a small mercy in an unforgiving landscape. You refill your canteen, splashing cool water on your face, savoring the brief respite. But the quiet doesn't last. One of the scouts returns, breathless and wide-eyed, pointing toward the ravine's edge. You follow their gaze and spot movement. Oxen, loose and panicked, bolting through the rocks. Their harnesses dangle, evidence of a wagon lost upstream. Someone curses loudly. You scramble up the slope, boots slipping on the rocky incline. At the top, you find the remains of a wagon scattered across the trail, wheels splintered, crates smashed open, flour mixing with dust and ash. The family who owned it stands nearby, faces pale with shock, voices raised in futile argument. The oxen had bolted, pulling the wagon off the path and over the edge. No one was hurt, but the loss of supplies is devastating. Dinner that night is quiet, the air heavy with the weight of the day's losses. The fire crackled, casting long shadows across the camp. Someone mends a broken harness with a strip of leather, hands working automatically, eyes distant. Another sits staring into the flames, whispering a song you don't recognize, its melody low and mournful. You lie back, gazing at the stars, which now seem sharper and more distant than ever. You think of the cliffside pass, of the oxen's trembling flanks, of the lost wagon and the supplies scattered like broken promises. You wonder how many more obstacles lie ahead, how many more losses you can bear before the trail claims you too. But in the morning, you'll rise again, lash down the wagon tighter, and keep moving forward. Because what else can you do? Morning arrives with an unexpected stillness. The sky is pale and cloudless, a thin, washed-out blue that feels almost surreal after the chaos of the past few days. The air is cooler, carrying the scent of dust and pine, and as you stir from your blanket, you notice the others moving more slowly, almost cautiously, as if afraid to jinx the quiet. The oxen stand calmly for once, their sides rising and falling with deep, even breaths. One of the women in the group pats a beast's flank and murmurs something soft, perhaps a prayer or a simple thank you. You pull yourself to your feet, stretch sore muscles, and glance down the trail ahead. It's less daunting than the cliffside passes you've just survived, winding gently through rolling hills dotted with scrub and thin clusters of trees. And then you see it. A small fort in the distance, its rough timber walls standing stark against the prairie. Relief floods through you like a sudden breath of fresh air. This is one of the trading posts you've heard about, a place where travelers can rest, resupply, and perhaps hear news of what lies ahead. The pace quickens as the group heads toward the fort, the oxen sensing the change in mood. The sun climbs higher, and you feel its warmth on your back, but it doesn't weigh you down as it did before. Instead, it feels almost hopeful. You can see smoke rising from chimneys, hear the faint clatter of carts, the distant call of a trader's voice. As you approach, the fort's gates swing open, and a few figures emerge, men and women in rough clothes, faces weathered by wind and sun. They call out greetings, offer water for the oxen, and direct you toward a shaded area where you can rest. The relief is palpable. You unhitch the oxen and let them drink deeply from a trough, their sides heaving with grateful sighs. Inside the fort's walls, the atmosphere is both busy and subdued. Traders call out prices for goods, flour, bacon, coffee, dried fruit, but their voices are tempered by a somber undercurrent. As you listen, You catch snippets of conversation, talk of wagons lost upriver, of sickness spreading among nearby camps, of a family that vanished into the hills and was never seen again. Historians still argue whether these stories were true or simply rumors meant to spook travelers, but you've seen enough to know that truth and fear often blend seamlessly on the trail. You trade what little you can, a spare knife, a length of rope, a few precious buttons, for a small bag of flour and a tin of lard. It's not much, but it's enough for a few days of thicker stew and a bit of fried bread. As you rest against the fort's rough timber walls, watching traders and travelers come and go, you feel a momentary sense of normalcy. Someone plays a fiddle near the gate, the tune bright and quick, and a few children dance clumsily in the dust. You almost laugh, but the sound catches in your throat, half-formed and fragile. That evening, you sit by a small communal fire inside the fort's walls, the warmth and light pushing back the encroaching darkness. You share stories with a trader who claims to have seen a wagon train vanish into a canyon ahead, swallowed by a sudden landslide. He swears he heard their cries echo for days after. Another traveler speaks of finding a lone, tattered bonnet caught in the branches of a tree miles from the trail, its owner never found. You listen, nodding along, feeling the weight of these shared fears settle over your shoulders. But for now, the walls of the fort feel like a thin but sturdy shield against the trail's danger. As the fire burns low, you drift into sleep, surrounded by the soft murmur of voices, the creak of wagon wheels, the faint strains of the fiddle. For the first time in days, you feel almost safe. In the early hours before dawn, you wake to the sound of footsteps outside the fort's walls, a measured, deliberate tread that pauses near the gate, then continues on. You lie still, listening, your heart quickening. Was it a trader, a traveler, or something else? The stories from the evening echo in your mind, but the fort remains quiet, and the steps fade into the distance. You close your eyes again, telling yourself it was nothing. When morning comes, you'll pack your supplies, hitch the oxen, and leave the fort behind. The trail is waiting. The morning sun spills over the fort's timber walls, casting long shadows that stretch across the courtyard. You wake to the sounds of wagons being hitched, traders calling last-minute offers, and oxen snorting as they are coaxed into harness. The fort has been a brief respite, but the trail calls you onward. You pack what little you have, flour, lard, a few new nails, and glance back at the fort one last time. The sturdy walls, the faint sounds of music still lingering in the air, the scent of baking bread from the communal ovens. It feels almost like a dream now. But as you turn to the trail, the reality settles heavy on your shoulders again. The path ahead climbs steeply into the mountains, the ground turning rocky and uneven. The oxen's hooves clatter against stones, their breath coming hard and fast. You walk beside them, offering quiet encouragement, though your own legs ache with the effort. The incline is punishing, each step a battle against the pull of gravity and the sheer weight of the wagon. As the day wears on, the air grows thinner, colder. Your breath fogs in front of your face, and the wind slices through your clothes like a knife. You pull your coat tighter, wishing you'd bartered for an extra blanket or a heavier jacket at the fort. The sun, though bright, offers little warmth, and the shadows stretch long and thin across the trail. Around midday, you pause on a narrow ledge to catch your breath. The view below is breathtaking, rolling hills fading into a haze of blue and green, the trail snaking behind you like a pale ribbon. But you don't linger. The climb ahead is even steeper, the trail narrowing to a path barely wider than the wagon itself. Historians still argue whether this final mountain stretch was the hardest part of the Oregon Trail, or if the dangers were more psychological than physical. But as you pull the wagon forward, feeling the wheels slip and scrape against the rocks, you're convinced it's both. The physical strain is immense, but the fear, the nagging dread of one misstep, one loose stone, one gust of wind, is almost unbearable. You stop frequently to catch your breath, the oxen trembling with exertion. Their sides are flecked with foam, their hooves chipping against the stone. You water them from a canteen, rationing the precious drops carefully. You stroke their necks, whisper words of reassurance, but they are just as exhausted as you. Late afternoon brings a chilling wind that howls down the mountain pass, carrying with it flecks of ice and snow. You hadn't expected snow this early, but the higher elevation makes the air colder, the ground harder. You wrap your blanket around your shoulders, teeth chattering as you trudge forward. Suddenly, a sharp crack splits the air, a rock slide, triggered by the wind and the shifting ground. Stones tumble down the slope ahead, sending up plumes of dust and debris. You pull the wagon to a halt, heart pounding, watching as the rocks settle. The path is partially blocked, strewn with boulders and smaller debris. You and your companions debate your next move. Some argue for turning back, but the trail behind is too narrow, too treacherous. Others suggest unloading the wagon and carrying supplies by hand. In the end, you decide to clear what you can, working together to roll stones aside, shovel debris, and widen the path just enough for the wagons to pass. It's back-breaking work, your muscles burning, your hands scrape raw, the wind doesn't let up, and the cold seeps deeper into your bone. But slowly, inch by inch, you clear a narrow channel through the debris. The wagons move forward, the oxen pulling with the last of their strength. By the time you reach a wider plateau, the sun is low on the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink. The air is bitterly cold, the wind biting at your cheeks and nose. You set up a hasty camp, huddling close to a small fire that smokes more than it burns. Dinner is a few spoonfuls of thin stew, eaten quickly and in silence. As night falls, you wrap yourself in your blanket and stare up at the stars. They seem sharper here, almost painfully bright against the dark sky. You think of the fort behind you, of the steep climb you've just survived, of the trail still ahead. You wonder if you'll ever truly feel warm again. You drift into uneasy sleep, dreaming of stone walls, of bread baking in ovens, of laughter and music. But the dreams shift into visions of rock slides, of wheels slipping, of oxen plunging into darkness. You wake often, listening to the wind howl through the pass, waiting for morning light. When dawn finally breaks, pale and weak, you rise, numb with cold, but determined. The trail won't wait. The pale morning sun creeps over the mountain tops, bathing the plateau in a cold, thin light that does little to dispel the frost clinging to the grass and rocks. You wake with a shiver, pulling your blanket tighter around your shoulders. Around you, the others stir slowly, their movement stiff and weary. The fire has long since gone out, leaving only a faint ring of ash and a few charred embers. The oxen, still huddled together for warmth, snort softly as they stretch and shake off the chill. Their breath hangs in the air like mist, and their sides tremble with fatigue. You move to check the harnesses, running your hands over cracked leather and frayed ropes, your fingers numb from cold. Breakfast is nothing more than a sip of weak coffee and a few crumbs of stale bread. The flour you managed to trade for at the fort is nearly gone, and the lard tin is scraped clean. A few in the group share quiet conversation about trying to trap small game or forage for edible roots, but the rocky ground offers little promise. Despite the cold and the exhaustion, the wagons are packed and ready to move by mid-morning. The trail ahead slopes downward at last, a welcome relief after the punishing climb of the past days. The descent is steep and treacherous, the ground slick with frost and loose stones, but the promise of lower ground and warmer temperatures urges you onward. The oxen move cautiously, their hooves sliding on the frosted rock. The wagons creak and groan as they navigate the narrow path, wheels grinding against stone. You walk alongside, steadying the load, your breath fogging the air. Each step is a careful negotiation between progress and disaster. Historians still argue whether the final stretch into the Willamette Valley was truly the easiest part of the journey, or if it was simply a different kind of challenge. You're beginning to understand that it's not about easy or hard. It's about endurance, about putting one foot in front of the other no matter how broken or exhausted you feel. By midday, the trail levels out, opening into rolling hills covered in golden grasses and clusters of evergreen trees. The air is warmer here, the wind gentler, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. For the first time in days, you feel a glimmer of hope, a faint stirring of anticipation. You pause with the others on a low rise, gazing out over the landscape below. The Willamette Valley spreads before you like a patchwork quilt. Green fields, winding rivers, and the distant glint of settlement. Someone lets out a shaky laugh. Others whisper prayers or simply stare in silence. You feel a weight lift from your shoulders, though exhaustion still clings to you like a second skin. The final miles pass in a haze of motion and fading adrenaline. The trail winds gently downhill, the oxen moving more easily, though their steps are still slow and measured. You catch glimpses of wildflowers blooming along the path, bright splashes of color against the dusty ground. The air feels softer, the sunlight warmer, as though the land itself is welcoming you. As the sun dips toward the horizon, you reach the valley floor. The wagons roll to a stop in a wide clearing near a stream, the water clear and cold as it burbles over smooth stone. You unhitch the oxen and let them drink deeply, their sides heaving with relief. Someone starts a small fire, the flames dancing brightly in the growing twilight. Dinner is a meager but satisfying affair, a bit of foraged greens, a scrap of meat from a lucky catch, and the last of the flour baked into a rough, chewy flatbread. It's not much, but it feels like a victory, a final act of defiance against the trail's endless hardships. As darkness settles, the group gathers around the fire, sharing quiet conversation and exhausted smiles. Someone starts humming a tune, and others join in, their voices rising softly into the night. You lean back, staring up at the stars, feeling the tension in your body slowly unwind. You think of the countless miles behind you, the dangers faced, the friends lost. You think of home, of family, of the reasons you set out on this journey. And you realize that, while the trail may have tried to break you, it didn't succeed. You made it. You drift into sleep with the sound of the stream in your ears, the warmth of the fire at your back, and the knowledge that, for the first time in what feels like forever, you've arrived. Morning arrives with a softness you haven't felt in weeks. The sky glows pale gold, and a light mist rises from the stream nearby, curling lazily into the air. You wake to the gentle murmur of voices and the creak of wagons as others begin packing their belongings. There's no rush today, no panic, no urgency, just a quiet, steady realization that the hardest part of the journey is behind you. You stretch, feeling the stiffness in your limbs ease under the warmth of the rising sun. The oxen graze nearby, their sides moving with slow, steady breath. Their coats are dusted with morning dew, and for the first time in what feels like forever, they seem calm. You walk to them, running a hand along a flank, feeling the familiar roughness of their hide. They've carried you through so much, through mud, rivers, fire, and fear. They are more than beasts of burden now. They're companions, survivors. Breakfast is a quiet affair, shared with companions who have become as close as family. Someone produces a handful of wild berries, tart and sweet, and passes them around. The taste explodes on your tongue, more flavorful than any feast you can remember. It's a small moment of joy, but it feels immense. The group lingers longer than usual, reluctant to leave the clearing. Conversations drift lazily from practical plans to gentle reminiscences of home, of the gardens left behind, the fields that once seemed endless, the faces of loved ones now waiting just a little farther ahead. Someone hums a song you half remember from childhood, and for a moment, you're a child again, curled up by a fire, listening to your mother's voice weaving through the melody. As the sun climbs higher, the wagons begin to move, rolling slowly down the valley floor. The trail is gentle now, winding between tall pines and wide meadows bursting with wildflowers. The air smells of earth and new grass, of pine resin and clear water. The wind carries birdsong, and you hear the distant laughter of other travelers ahead. But for all its beauty, the valley holds memories too. You glance over your shoulder, back toward the mountains you cross, and think of those who didn't make it this far. Friends lost to sickness, wagons abandoned, supplies scattered like breadcrumbs along the trail. Their names echo silently in your mind, woven into the landscape like ghostly markers. Historians still argue about the numbers. How many travelers were lost along the Oregon Trail? How many dreams were shattered? But numbers don't tell the whole story. You felt the weight of those losses, seen the empty places at the fireside, heard the muffled sobs in the dark. You know the price that was paid. As the day wears on, the path widens, and you pass the first signs of settlement. Fields neatly plowed, fences strung with care, small cabins with smoke rising from their chimneys. You exchange nod with those already homesteading here, their faces weathered but calm. Some wave, others simply watch in silence, their eyes reflecting the same mix of exhaustion and relief you feel. The wagons roll to a stop near a shallow bend in the river. You unhitch the oxen and let them drink, their muzzles sinking deep into the cool water. You wash your hands and face, scrubbing away layers of dust and sweat, feeling the grime of the trail give way to something cleaner, fresher. As the sun sets, you sit by the water's edge, your toes sinking into the soft mud, and watch the sky bloom with colors, pink, orange, violet. The others gather nearby, their voices soft, their laughter gentle. Someone shares a bit of bread and dried meat, and you savor it like a feast. You close your eyes, listening to the river's song, and let the memories of the journey wash over you. The rough start, the rivers and storms, the dust and sickness, the strange noises in the night, the arguments and laughter, the fears and the moments of unexpected beauty. All of it has led to this moment, a quiet evening by the river, with a promise of a new life just ahead. You realize that the trail has changed you. You're no longer the same person who left Independence so many miles and so many weeks ago. You're tougher, perhaps a little older in spirit, but also more grateful for simple things, a drink of clear water, a scrap of bread, the warmth of a shared fire. As night falls and the stars prick the sky, you feel a quiet resolve settle over you. Tomorrow, you'll step into the Willamette Valley proper, claim your piece of land, and begin the hard work of building a new life. But tonight, you'll rest. You'll honor those you left behind, cherish those still beside you, and savor the simple peace of having arrived. The morning arrives gently, as if the valley itself is taking a soft breath before handing you the day. The sky is painted in delicate shades of pink and pale blue, the air crisp with the promise of something new. You wake slowly, savoring the way the sunlight filters through the trees, dappling your blanket with golden patches. The birds are already singing, their clear notes weaving a melody that feels impossibly sweet after the silence of the trail. You stretch and sit up, feeling the familiar ache in your muscles, but this time it's different, less burdened, more like the hum of a body ready for wake. Around you, others are stirring too, voices low and unhurried, the sounds of breakfast, water splashing, a fire crackling, a quiet laugh shared over a pot of coffee, filling the morning air. There's no rush today. For the first time since you set out, there's no frantic urgency to beat the sun, no fear of what's waiting just beyond the bend in the trail. Today, you can simply exist. You can savor the warmth of the morning, the scent of pine and fresh grass, the gentle murmur of the river. You help repack the wagon, though it's lightened now, some supplies lost, some left behind, but also because you're not carrying as much fear anymore. The oxen move with steady ease, their steps sure and confident as if they, too, sense the journey's end. You walk beside them, hand resting on a yoke, murmuring soft encouragement not because they need it, but because you want them to hear your gratitude. The trail winds gently, opening into a broad meadow where the first settlers have already staked their claim. Neat rows of crops peek from the soil, tidy cabins stand with smoke rising from their chimneys, and children's laughter carries on the breeze. You pass a woman tending a garden, her hands deft as she ties up stalks of beans. She glances up and offers a nod and a faint smile, her face lined but kind. The group pauses near a stand of tall pines where the land is flat and fertile. This, you decide, will be home. You unhitch the oxen, letting them graze on the sweet grass, and begin to unload the wagon. The others do the same, voices rising with cautious optimism as they discuss where to build, how to divide the land, what crops to plant first. It feels strange, almost surreal, to be thinking of the future after so many days focused solely on survival. As you wake, you catch yourself glancing back over your shoulder, half expecting to see the trail winding behind you. But it's no longer there. Not really. The ruts and footprint will fade, the dust will settle, and in time, the land will reclaim the scars left by your passage. All that will remain are the stories, your stories. Historians still argue over the true legacy of the Oregon Trail, debating whether it was a tale of triumph, tragedy, or something in between. But for you, standing in this quiet valley with the scent of fresh earth in your nostrils and the weight of the past lifting from your shoulders, it's clear. It was a journey of endurance, of loss, of hope, and of rediscovery. That evening, you gather with your companions around a fire that burns brighter than any you've seen before. The food is simple but plentiful. Bread baked from the last of the flour, a rabbit snared early in the day, fresh greens from the valley's edge. Laughter bubbles up, tentative at first, then stronger. Someone starts singing a song, and soon others join in, the melody weaving through the night air like a thread stitching your new life together. You sit back, listening, watching the firelight dance on familiar faces. You think of those left behind, of the hardships endured, of the miles crossed and the fears overcome. You feel a quiet pride, a deep gratitude for the strength that carried you here, and a cautious hope for what comes next. The stars emerge one by one, their light soft and steady, as if they, too, are celebrating your arrival. You feel the land settle around you, the air cool and sweet, the future wide and waiting. And now, as the last embers of the fire fade into the soft hush of the valley night, you feel your body release its final tension. The air is cooler now, the breeze carrying a faint scent of pine and earth, and the distant murmur of the river is a gentle reminder of life's quiet persistence. You pull your blanket tighter, the fabric warmed by the day's sun, and settle into a comfortable hollow in the grass. The stars above shimmer softly, their light diffused by a thin veil of mist. You breathe in, feeling the coolness of the night air fill your lungs, and exhale slowly, letting go of the last traces of fear and strain. Around you, the quiet murmurs of your companions rise and fall like the lapping of waves, comforting and familiar. You listen to their voices, to the creak of wagons settling, to the soft rustle of leaves, and you feel the landscape itself lull you into rest. Your thoughts drift gently, no longer caught in the constant push forward. You think of home, of what you've lost, of what you've gained, of the strength you discovered along the way. You picture the days ahead not as challenges to be endured, but as steps to be embraced, moments to be savored. As your eyes grow heavy, you let the last image settle. The golden fields of the Willamette Valley stretching wide beneath a sky scattered with stars, your wagon resting nearby, the oxen asleep, your companions close, the world finally still. Sleep comes softly now, a whisper of peace folding around you, cradling you in the gentle embrace of a journey complete.